Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, John. You've saved me a heap of effort because I'm also talking about user events. So that's like the first 40 minutes of my presentation, we can just brush over. Cool. Thank you. Thanks, guys, for having me today. I'm going to apologize up front. I'm currently in South Africa and the internet is terribly flaky. So if I just leave, I've either been eaten by a lion or more likely my internet's just gone down. Okay. I have a nice fast fiber connection, which works about 80% of the day. So I don't know, take what you got, right? Cool, but let's jump straight in. Okie dokie. Let me try and do this. Windows seems to mess me around and I can't figure out sometimes how to share just this guy. Whenever I try and go into presentation mode, it puts it on a different monitor. Anyone know how to fix that?
I don't know. If you run I found that if you run the presentation and then share your screen and pick PowerPoint, it tends to pick the one that.
Oh yeah, but then I've got to turn my head like, and I'm gonna look like.
Got you.
Okay. I tell you what, I actually did manage to get it earlier when I did this and I screwed around and I did this duplicate and something seemed to happen. It did that. And now I can say. So, you know what? I think you guys are gonna have to just live with the PowerPoint up on the screen.
No worries.
I think we'll all be fine. Okay.
Yeah.
I might be able to interject and help. So in PowerPoint, you've got your top ribbon and you have the one called slideshow next to animations. Yeah. And then on the there's a character there called monitor, and there we go. Yeah. Oh yeah. It's
okay.
So
now
many
monitors.
That's
which. Okay. Let's try that guy. There we go. Awesome. Can everyone see that? Okay.
Nice one. Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. So apology one, I might run out of internet. Apology number two, I'm having a bad day. LabVIEW is not actually my day job anymore. I have a real paying job where I do Unity and C#, and I had a demonstration earlier today and it went terribly. So yeah, so it's not a great start to the day, but let's see where we get to. Cool. So my name is Neil Pate. I'm actually from down here, the arse end of Africa, from a little place called Durban. After a while, I got bored of that, left, came to London for a bit. I'm actually half British, so they let me in. And there I found LabVIEW, fell in love with LabVIEW, spent a whole lot of time doing it, and then got fed up with your English weather and came back to South Africa. So currently I'm down at the bottom, somewhere around about there. It's nice and warm, and we don't have very much coronavirus. So you guys should come one day. So I'm going to make this quick. Been programming for an awful long time. Started with C64, progressed through all the usual stuff: Pascal, VB, C, some assembler, C++. Fell in love with LabVIEW, but actually my day job now these days is I do C# and Unity with a bit of LabVIEW consultancy on the side. I'm an architect, an embedded developer, an instructor, and a champion. And I've been doing LabVIEW for an awful long time, but there's plenty I don't know. So when I make mistakes during this presentation, please don't be too harsh. Okay, and I've played with a lot of NI hardware. I've broken a bunch of NI hardware, so I know how this all works. Done a whole bunch of cool stuff, worked for a Formula 1 team, put some satellites into space, worked with some particle accelerators, made some big satellites, worked with semiconductors, and most importantly, done some work with coffee, which gets us all through our day. I'm going to be talking about actors in LabVIEW. This is a super informal presentation, guys. It's like I haven't really studied any of this stuff. This is just my own take on things. So I'm not going to go into any of the theoretical stuff on how actors should work or any of that proper stuff. I'm just going to give you kind of it's going to be more of a tutorial. And we're going to go through some practical stuff of how to implement some actors in LabVIEW on a basic level. It certainly gets way more complicated if you try and do this properly. Importantly, I'm not going to talk about the NI actor framework. I don't particularly like it. I don't think it meets my first requirement of being simple. This is just my own thing. So this is what I've called the minimal actor framework, which I've used on a bunch of projects for about the last 5 or 6 years. And I'm just going to scratch the surface. So we're going to start with a blank block diagram and work our way up from there. So without further ado, let's fire up some LabVIEW. Okay, I don't want that on the screen. I just want LabVIEW. Why is it doing that? I don't know why it's doing that. I'm going to move my presentation somewhere else. Okay, right. So all I've done is I have an empty project. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. All right, so here we go. So let's make up a random application, right? Let's say we want to, we have a source of some data that's being generated and we just want to see it on the screen. Maybe we want to do some processing on that data. Maybe we want to log some of it to disk. It's like a pretty basic test and measurement type thing. So what I'm not going to do, John's super covered the basics of user events. So I'm just going to dive straight in, but I'm going to go quite slowly. I'm going to do this step by step from blank. So at any time, please, anyone's welcome to shout out. Let me put the Teams chat up somewhere else. Probably when you have 4 monitors is you can never find anything. Okay. All right. Okay. So if I miss messages in the chat, please just someone say something. Okay. So here we go. This is going to be like the GUI, the main controller, maybe whatever we want to call it. Let's just make some stuff. So first thing, obviously, you can't really get very far without a main while loop. All right, and I'm going to have a data generator source. So down here, I'm going to have my vibration data being generated. Like this might come from a data acquisition device or something. Right now, I don't have any of those with me. My stereo next to me is not powered on because it basically crashes my computer. We won't go there. So I'm going to use an ExpressVI. So I hope I'm not going to get hate mail for this, but I am actually going to use an ExpressVI just for simulating a noisy signal. All right, so I'm going to have some kind of sine wave looking like that. Maybe let's chuck some noise on. That's probably a bit too much. So there's my vibration data. All right, so I'm going to be reading it from a sensor. Okay, so this loop here, we can think of it as a data generator. All right, and this guy here is my GUI. And I really want to get this information up to here. Okay, there's a million ways of doing this in LabVIEW, and I'm just going to present my preference. Okay, I'm not here to preach and say the right way or the wrong way. This is just a way. It's a way I like. As John said, user events are great. I find them lovely. They're high performance. To really worry about them. So I'm going to show you guys how to do this with user events. So I need to get this stuff up to here. So first things first, I suppose I should probably save this guy. Otherwise, who knows what's going to happen. So I'm going to call this the main GUI. Okay, and I'm going to evolve this over time. So don't panic. Let's go. Let's be a bit more thorough, and let's have our main GUI here. All right. So now here's my VR with the main GUI, and this is it's a horrible data type, is it? I don't even know what it is. It's some kind of dynamic data, which I don't actually know anybody who uses it. I give me a good old array. Right. So at this point now, I have my data type, which is an array, and I'm going to try and get this up to here. So if I create myself a constant from that, here's my data type, and I'm going to start making some user events. So here is the user event. Forgive me, tidy up as I go along. You're going to hear a whole bunch of unnecessary clicks and moves. It's literally 20 years of habit now. I'm sorry. I can't undo it. So anyway, so there's this guy here, and obviously I want to register for it. And don't forget, when you use user events, things have to be labeled. So this guy here, this data source needs to have a name. So we need to give it a label. I'm going to call this my vibration data. And remember, what I'm presenting to you now is not necessarily how I would do this if someone was paying me and I had 2 weeks to do this. Now, I've got like 30 minutes left to get this done. So there's going to be a couple of shortcuts that take place. Again, don't judge me too harshly. So we've created our user event. We've registered for it, which means we kind of behind the scenes are making a queue for it. As John said, never fork this wire. If you need a copy of it, make a second copy of the registered event. Okay, I can't do too much with an event without an event structure. And obviously LabVIEW, because it doesn't want to help you, it doesn't give you the dynamic event by default. You have to turn it on. And obviously it always puts it at the top, which is never particularly useful. But there's that guy there. Right, so as soon as I do that, I now have the ability to add this event source to this user event. So I can right click here and I can edit it. And there enough, sure enough, that there, where that piece of text there matches that guy there. Right, so let's pick that. That again gives me the data type. And as John said, if you put a cluster in here, this will unbundle it for you. Sometimes that's cool, sometimes that's not so cool, and you have to rebundle it. It's always the other one that you want, right? Okay, so here we go. It's always nice to have a runnable program. Obviously, right now I don't. I'm actually going to use exactly the same technique for shutting this guy down. I'm going to use the panel close event, which I like to handle using the filter, which is the red guy. So I'm going to discard the event there. So if I discard that and wire that in, that will basically not close the front panel, which is not what I want to do because I don't actually want to lose my work, but it will stop the loop. Right, so this is a pretty handy way of stopping that guy. I now need to stop this loop, and a simple way is just to check if the event is valid. So I can do something like this, move these out the way, and we're going to destroy this guy. Right, so when I close my panel, or rather when I attempt to close my panel, I'm going to destroy the event and I can do something with that down here. So I still haven't actually done anything with this data. I still need to get this guy up to here, and obviously I can do that by generating the data. And if you guys notice closely, this wire user events are strictly typed, and the color of the wire is taken from the source of the data. So we've got our double array with sandwich between the, I don't know, what's that color called, turquoise or cyan reference wires, right? So as soon as I do that, it's going to allow me to pass this guy in here, and now I can quite handily take that up to there and stop it. Okay, so LabVIEW seems pretty happy at the moment. It's runnable. I haven't actually handled the data yet, so now let's put a front panel control down. So I'm going to drop myself down a graph. So I'm sure everyone knows the difference between a graph and a chart, but I didn't for 10 years. So I'm going to tell everyone a graph is a snapshot. Every time you write to a graph, you basically update the whole thing, whereas a chart, it has a history. You update it kind of point by point or multiple point by multiple point. But in this instance, I'm just going to take the whole subset and chuck it on there. So that's this guy here. Because I'm a good guy, I'm going to name that vibration data. All right, so this might work. There's a chance that this is going to work. So let's see what happens when I run it. Sure enough, I have a loop up here showing me some data and a loop down here producing some data. Hopefully when I do this, it's going to shut down. And it does, right? LabVIEW stopped, and it's pretty nice. It didn't close this guy. So that's like the bare essence of user events to pass data between two loops. Okay, John says he likes to keep these with wires. Wires are super cool. Like wires are your friend in LabVIEW. Wires are nice, but I actually when I create what I call my actors, I generally spawn them dynamically, and I actually have no way of having a wire. I have no way of taking wires, so I need to somehow do something else with my wires. So, but we'll get to that in a bit. Is everyone kind of okay with that? Like that's the basics. can I move on from the basics? So if I lose you guys here, it's going to ramp up, right? We're gonna if you don't understand the essence of user events, we're gonna lose you. So can I take it as a kind of a given that everyone's okay with that? Let's see. Okay, cool. So everyone's mostly smiles. Okay, so let's crack on. So what we are to do here is make kind of like a flexible messaging structure. As soon as you talk actors, you think of like an actor on a stage, right? You give an instruction or something. You say, please do this. Please stab Horatio with the sword. I don't know. Was that? I don't know if Horatio got whatever. But please do this. Please do that. It's like, would you mind terribly doing this thing for me? So you're kind of giving an instruction. So what I like to think of them is as a message. So what I want to do is when I have a message system is kind of make this a bit more flexible. So instead of this being strictly typed, and this kind of actually goes back to the question we had earlier of when to use a variant or when to use a type def and things like that. So I kind of have a bit of a hybrid approach, and that is I use a bit of both. So let's just do a bit of housekeeping now. So in my project, I'm going to make a virtual folder. I'm going to call this main GUI just for our insanity. I'm going to move this into here, right? And I'm going to create a type def, right? Type defs are your friend. Always never use a non-type def control. It's just literally very little value in not having it at least type def. Okay, I generally pick strict type def just because I'm OCD and I like them to all look the same. Sometimes you make it a type def just because you maybe want a GUI version to look a little different to the actual data types. You maybe want a bigger font or something, but typically I pick a strict type def. So for stuff you never see, without thinking, I'll just make this a strict type def. So what I'm going to do is introduce a cluster, which is going to be my message package. So I'm giving an instruction to someone. So there's typically a name of some sort. So I'm going to have a string, which I'm going to call name. And then sometimes you have data you want to pass along with that message. So in that case, without thinking too hard, I drop a variant in. I went through a phase where everything was like totally typed and I had a user event for every single piece of data and there were no variants, and it was awful. It was just so much management for the drama, and I'd far rather live with a once-off development error when I've accidentally fed a snake into my variant and I've tried to typecast it back as a DAC-MX channel, and I'm like, oh crap, what was it doing? Obviously that's not going to work. I'm glad that wasn't the SpaceX ready to take off. This was at my desk and we're all cool. So I do use a variant. So we can declare something like this, and I'm going to call this a message. So this is super. If you guys have used any kind of Q framework or whatever, I'm not super familiar with the latest ones, but it's quite common to have like a name of a message and a payload of some sort. And actually that's probably more accurately labeled as payload. I'm going to call this message, and unfortunately because I'm using libraries or anything, I'm going to quite quickly get name collisions, so I wouldn't normally do this, but I'm just going to call it main GUI message. Right, so that's this guy here, and obviously I wouldn't leave it as a blank icon again because I don't have libraries. I'm not getting banners and crap like that, so I'm just going to very quickly call it something like that. Let's go MSG. Okay, there's my thing here. And this is going to be the type of data that I'm going to pass to this guy. So I'm going to replace this thing. So I can take one of these and drag it onto there, double click to get the more sensible looking one, give it a label and change that guy to this guy. Right, so it's obviously going to break the code in a bunch of places because all of a sudden you'll see my cluster sandwiched between the two reference wires. I clearly can't pass a 1D array into it, and LabVIEW is like, what are you doing? You've broken this code. So So let's fix that. So first things first is when I'm publishing up the data, I've obviously now got to use that data type. So I can just take a copy of that thing and bundle it nice and neatly like that. So now I have a name and a payload. This is obviously the name of my message, and I'm going to call this perhaps something like vibration data. The payload is just my variant data, or it's my 1D array, and I'm relying on LabVIEW to cast that to a variant, and I can now happily chuck that up to there. I don't normally screw around with the priorities. The only time I ever do that is sometimes I have like a shutdown message, which is like mega important that you handle that first, or maybe, or like an emergency stop or something. But generally, I don't screw around too much with the priorities, so I leave it at normal. Okay, so that's getting the data up to this loop. Obviously, this is broken now, but all I need to do to fix it is pick this guy, which fixes that bit of code, but obviously breaks that now. And as you can see, LabVIEW is handily unbundling it for me, the same as this. So name and payload. So what I need to do now is handle the different kinds of messages. So now I can take my name and I can call this vibration data. Obviously, if I spell this incorrectly, it's not going to work. And you're going to do that at least once. It's not a problem. You just correct it. Again, I went through a phase where I didn't have any strings. Everything was an enum, and I would have an enum with the message type, where I would define the message names, and it was just more drama than it was worth. So I've gone back to strings, and I just deal with the fact that every now and then I'm going to put a space in there, and I'm going to take 2 hours to find that space. I accept that that's just a thing I have to do every now and then. I'm getting better at not doing that though. So obviously at this point now I have a variant. I need to still turn it into my 1D double array. We can variant palette and just turn it into that. Again, guys, don't ignore my error handling here. I'm just not going to do any error handling. It's not what I would do on a space probe, but for the purpose of this demo, just ignore the fact that I'm being sloppy with error handling. Okay, you may or may not know that this variant to data has this very handy feature that it will automatically adapt the wire to the type you wire in. So one of the very few nodes in LabVIEW that does backwards propagation of data type. So it knew that I wanted to put that in there. I personally hate that feature, but I cheat a bit. Once it's done it, I then right click and I create my constant like that. I don't know why I do that because it's not any safer, because I've literally just taken information that I told it to do. But there we go. So now I'm sort of starting to make a messaging framework. So you can see here I've got a message. The message is called vibration data. I'm generating it in this loop here, and let's just put something on like diagram label. Let's call this guy vibration data generator. Right. We'll call this the main GUI just because we're consistent. GUI or main controller or whatever you want to call this. Okay, so we have a non-broken run arrow. So I don't think I've made any mistakes. Obviously, I've left this in here. Not going to kill anybody, but let's get rid of it before my OCD kicks in. It looks like this might work. Run it, and sure enough, okay. All right, we haven't actually broken anything. We haven't added any new features, but it still works. Okay, and it should still hopefully close, and it does. Okay, so that's kind of nice, but these wires are bugging me. Like, just something about them. They just currently I want to get rid of them. Right, that's the bottom line, because I'll tell you why. When you start launching things dynamically, you can't easily take wires, and actually. It gets a bit confusing when you start getting more complicated frameworks. Who owns the user event? Which piece of code made it? Which piece of code controls the lifetime of it? And things get a little bit complicated. So for now, I'm just going to show you guys a simple way how to get rid of the wire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of make an FGV. It's not really an FGV. because I don't actually need to write to it. It's more like was it a worm or something? Write once, read many. Okay, so it's like a worm global. So there's a bunch of different ways to do this. One of the simple ways is just to drop down a first call node. So on the very first instance, it's going to run this code, right? Which is the true case. But then every time after that, I'm going to say, you know what? I just want to keep my copy. I want to keep my copy. Every time after that, just give me this guy back. Right, so every time after the first call, it's going to be false, which is just going to propagate back that thing. So by turning this thing into a sub-VI, all of a sudden now, I've effectively got a global copy of this reference, right? This user event reference. And note, I don't do it here. I don't want the registered event. The registered event, this thing here has to live within here. Like these guys have to be super tightly coupled because this is effectively the queue for this thing. I only want one copy of this. I may have multiple copies of the registered event. If I want to handle that piece of data in a couple of places, I have to register for it multiple times. So that gives me this thing. So this is going to be, let's just tidy this up. No doubt LabVIEW's butchered the block diagram. Let's do that like that. And let's call that main GUI user event. Okay, and again, I can't bear to look at the default icon, so let's just do something like event, chuck that thing up there. Again, I would normally have banners and you'd use classes and you'd get stuff for free, but I'm just doing the hand waving. So this is going to be main GUI. Main GUI. Let's leave it at that. Something like that, right? Main GUI. So now I can actually take this thing and bring it down into here without too much drama. I can bring that to here. And obviously I can then kill this wire. And I can do that. Bring that nice and close. Obviously the code is broken because it doesn't know what to do here. So I guess I could do something like that. I mean, I could probably bring this in here if I wanted to. It's the same thing. That's just a little bit messier in my mind. So that's like that. This is broken. I don't know why it's broken. What have I done here? Variant to data contains. Okay, I haven't even wired in the variant. That's why that's broken. Not quite sure how that got broken, but there we go. Okay, so runnable VI. Let's just see what happens. Sure enough, still running, right? Okay, so now that I've got rid of my wire, I can now do something like this, and I can turn this guy into a sub-VI. So all of a sudden, my data generator has just become this. So this is now vibration data generator, which I'm going to put in a sub-VI. I mean, I would never normally have like a vibration data generator process. I would have an actor which handles like my DAC. It would have an actor which talks to my FPGA reading from the FIFO or something like that. So this is just really specific for this.
Just on that there, would you, on your DAC, if you had a multi or different types of signals coming in through your DAC, would you split them into different actors? Or so would you have a digital actor, analog in, analog out, or would you have them all in one?
Okay, good, great question. I would. It super depends on the hardware. Cheaper. So typically, I would have a single DAC actor per piece of hardware, right? Yeah. Because as soon as you start having multiple timing domains, often it throws a big wobbly, right? If you try and have a clock rate of this, but then your digital rate is different, it's a wobbly. So very often I would create a DAC actor for maybe a single compact DAC chassis or something like that, or a PXI card. And in that actor, I would handle the channels relative to that actor. But I've definitely done it the other way, where I've had like a digital I/O actor, where I've handled the digital I/O from a bunch of different cards.
Yeah.
So I can't say I'm super consistent with that.
So if you had in the instance where you had one actor for a card that had digital and analog, would you have multiple loops in there then to manage your acquisition, or would you try and incorporate all that into a single loop somehow?
Yeah. I suspect, so I'm a very big fan these days of single loop architecture. I find the more loops you add, the bigger your pain in the ass, actually. So what I often, so I think, John, you said you haven't come across DAC MX events. A lot of the DAC cards have digital change events. So there you can actually register for a digital change. So your event structure can handle the fact that your digital port has changed. So again, it's like a single loop. So you don't have to have a timeout. But I guess if knowing nothing else about the system, my first choice would be keeping it simple and having a single actor for that piece of hardware, and trying to keep the update rate down to like 10 hertz or something, where it's quick enough to sample a button and no one's going to know that I've missed it by 50 milliseconds. But also I can get a big enough chunk of my analog inputs that I can show somebody and show it on the screen and have my graphs look like they're actually real time. So that would probably be my opening gambit. If that wasn't fast enough, say I had to do like software edge detection, then I would probably chuck in a factor where I was sampling it, at the max loop rate or something.
So it comes down a little bit to, in what you're saying, to kind of your acquisition rate really, as to whether you need to start splitting out the different types of data you're acquiring.
Yeah, totally. But I mean, the thing is, like, because the analog stuff is often buffered on the card, right? You can rely on the DAC itself buffering a whole bunch of data for you. You can kind of afford to read it only like once a second or something, maybe, if you don't have to react super quickly to it. Digitals, maybe you do need to react a bit quicker. It super depends, right?
Yeah, nice one.
Okay, cool. All right, so what have we done? We've turned that free running bottom part of the block diagram into this guy and vibration data generator. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rename this. I'm going to call this a process, because I like to, in my brain, I like to think of processes as these free running VIs. It's a loop of some sort. So let's just do something like this, loop, just to show me that something's happening here. So we're going to call it, what's it? A vibration data gen. All right. So hopefully I haven't actually changed anything, but I've just now made my block diagram smaller. I mean, my goal is to have the block diagram that big, right? That's when I can stop, is when I've actually tidied it up so much that there's nothing actually to see other than when I care about debugging a thing. So that's why, again, I like to get rid of that loop. But let's just make sure this still works. And it does. Cool. Chris, how am I doing for time? Because I could waffle on this for literally all afternoon. When should I stop?
You probably got at least another 20 minutes, I'd have thought, 25 minutes.
Cool. All right. I'm actually going into way more detail than I planned. So I'm probably going to, rather than speed up, I'm probably just going to try and aim for less, if that's okay. All right. Okay. So it's still working, right? We haven't broken anything. I always like to have something that's runnable. So a quick recap. What have we done? We've created a few kind of actors. We have a main GUI, which is sort of an actor. We have our vibration data generator actor. And again, I'm splitting them up into virtual folders. In a proper framework, these would be classes or libraries or something, giving you some nice name spacing. But I haven't for now. Okay, so let's think about extending this a bit more. What if I wanted to see on this GUI the average value of the signal? and we talked about a few things. Maybe we wanted to, what do we want to do? Our boss told us we have to log this to disk. Let's say he wants us to log the average. Okay, that gives us a few things to aim for. So you have to log the average. So somehow we have to get the average of this guy. So clearly we have the data here. You know, we could just at this point drop in a mean, and sure enough, if I did that like that, then hopefully I trust. Let's have a look at the implementation. It's a DLL, so we can't actually tell, but I trust that NI knows how to calculate the mean of a 1D array. So I could drop this here, and there's the mean. Sorry, bring it up here. Don't know how well you guys can see that, so let's make that bigger. And let's put some sensible formatting on. Let's go for this. Go for like 4 digits of precision. Okay, and right justified. Please, if one of you guys ever runs NI, please give the option to write justify numbers by default. Like I would worship you forever. The amount of times I have had to right click to write justify number. But anyway, right, let's run this guy, and we can see that on average it's pretty close to 0, which I guess is what I would expect, seeing it's a sine wave with some noise on it. For our own sanity, let's go into our data generator and turn it off, see what happens to our averaging. I'm kind of hoping it goes to 0. Oh, it doesn't. Maybe that's because we haven't actually got a, you know what? You know why? Because we haven't got a whole sine wave here. I think by default it goes to 10.1 hertz. So I bet you if I put that to 10 hertz, probably going to get most of the part of a sine wave. Sure enough, 0. Right. Okay. So that's working, right? But that's not a great thing to do. I've now put some data processing in my GUI, right? It works, and I'm happy with it, but it's not the right thing to do. Like I would feel bad about actually doing this. So let's do this in a slightly more professional way. If we wanted someone else to look at our code, we wouldn't want to show them this. So let's get rid of that technique. That's not a particularly nice thing to do. So let's introduce a second actor. It's going to be like a data processing actor. Sorry, let me just tidy that guy up there. It's really bugging me. Okay, I'll probably also do that. Okay, so let's have a second actor. So we're going to have it's next going to be a third actor. It's going to be data processing, which is pretty typical in like a test and measurement kind of environment. So we're going to have a new VI, which is going to be, again, a loop with an event structure, because that's just how it always is. And this guy, the purpose of this guy is to give me the average. That's for argument's sake, that's all he has to do is get the average. So he needs to get this data. All right. Okay, but here's our first problem, right? Because this user event is actually for the main GUI. So I have used the user event to update the data on the main GUI. So I can't actually reuse this technique. What I really want to do is get this piece of data somewhere else. So maybe this, knowing a bit more about the design wasn't the best thing. What I really would want to do is broadcast this data, because there might be a bunch of people interested in this. So I'm going to change this design a little bit. So rather than me forcing the GUI to update the data, I'm going to change this technique to like a broadcast data kind of technique. So my data generator, what I'm going to do is just going to make something like a API. Guys, we're getting to the point in the demonstration that I didn't get around to preparing. So this is where it's all just going to fall to pieces, because in principle, I know exactly what I want to do, but so bear with me, right? So what I need to do is make a user event that I can share with multiple people. So in this instance, I may actually go with a strictly type user event, because my vibration data is not going to change. So I'm going to use a similar technique to the user event here. I'm going to use a similar technique. So I'm going to obviously make a user event, but now the data type itself is going to be this thing here. So kind of similar to how we actually had right in the beginning. So here's my 1D array of double. So let's take that here. Okay, and obviously we're going to call it something like vibration data. All right. This can look like that, and we have to make it so that I can actually share it with multiple people. So we're going to do our same technique with the first call. I'm going to do that guy. And a feedback node. Don't know what I did there. Feedback node. Give me that thing. And in the false case, I'm going to return that. So now this thing is my vibration data user event, which is this terminal here. Okay, I'm going to save this thing, vibration data. It's going to be vibration data user events. Normally, this would be libraries or classes, so you would have access scope. So right now, I'm just using the project, so I don't have any access scope, which is generally a bad thing. I really like access scope. I like being able to tell people, here's typically my API virtual folder. I would make this thing public, and I would make other things private, so nothing else could hook into sub VIs from that process. So the user event itself does not actually need to be in the API. I'm going to put it up here. What I like to do is I like to make the registration part of the API. So I'm going to make a new VI, and I'm actually going to register for the event. Why is that? Sorry, I've done the wrong thing. So I'm going to drop the user event down. Sorry. I'm not going to change the icon there. I'm kind of running out of time a bit. So I just want to show you the principle. So now this guy is a registered version of that. So this is going to be vibration data. Okay. And it's a user event. So I can hook this up to here. All right, and this is going to be now my vibration data. And many years ago, I had to think of a name for this, and I called it an observer. It's a crap name, but I've just stuck with it. It's effectively the registered user events. If anyone has a suggestion for what I should call it, I'll be happy to entertain it. But I've got this in so many places in my code now that I'm not probably going to change. So this is the vibration data observer, and I am actually going to change this icon because I want in particular. So put that thing on, and there's a particular glyph I like to use, and I can literally never find it. It's got like an eyeball on it. Maybe it's a view. No. Oh, there it is. That guy. Okay, so that's like you observing it. I know it's terrible. But I've just gotten used to that thing. So this is the vibration data, and it is a observer for the user events. Right. So wherever I drop this thing down, I'm getting a registered event for that stuff. Okay, sorry, my diagrams are getting messier and messier. Promise you, if you paid me to do work, it wouldn't be this messy. But so now, obviously, I'm no longer using this message. I actually don't think it's a good idea to have a message saying vibration data. What I would do is I would take this observer, sorry. So in my main GUI, I would take my vibration data and I would say, you know what, I care about this. Let me bundle it in. So now I'm going to have my message channel, but I'm also going to have the vibration data. Sorry, and I've bundled in the wrong place. That's why the wires didn't look similar. Yeah, I nearly caught myself out big time there. I have to bundle this thing. Right, so that's the first one. and that's the second one, and I can bundle it, and obviously it changes to pink because that's just LabVIEW wants to mess with me. And now I have two things. I have two events. I have, first of all, the quite horribly, this is why I hate the event structure. The first one is this top guy, and the second one now is my vibration data. So this guy here is now obviously strictly typed, so I don't need the case structure anymore. I don't need any of that stuff. I can do that. And I can do that. And hopefully now, if I look in my vibration, I'm no longer using the main GUI message anymore. No longer using any of this stuff. I'm going to use the vibration user event, which is that thing, which I'm making once, and I get rid of all of this stuff. And hopefully I can pass that to there. Unless I've done something stupid, ship all the Y that into there. Right, so now I'm getting the reference once, putting it here, chucking it up to there. I've registered for it up in my GUI. I'm handling it here. Hopefully, this should still give me a sine wave. Can't say I'm that confident because I've gone very quickly through that, but let's see what happens. And actually, I'm cheating there because I've got a 10 Hertz sine wave, so you guys aren't going to believe me. So let's make this 10.1 with a bit of noise, just so that, and hooray, right, so it's still working. I haven't actually broken it. And what I have broken now, I don't know if you guys saw that, is when I close this, the main GUI stops, but this loop's still running. All right, so what you would typically have is like a shutdown message that you would broadcast, and that I can no longer use this technique where I'm closing that because obviously this reference and this reference are not related anymore at all. So for now, pretend you didn't see it, but I'm just going to hit that abort button. Okay, so all of that nonsense was just to get me allow me to handle the data in a different way. Because if you remember, I'm trying to create my data processing mechanism. So now that I've got the data being broadcast, I can come back to my data processing GUI, and I'm now going to handle exactly the same data. So I'm going to give myself an observer. I'm going to create the dynamic user event. Sorry, I'm now definitely rushing because I'm running out of time, but there it is. Come on, you bent wires. 1 pixel out. There's my user event data, right? So that's the data there. So now we can run our mean in this piece of code. Right, and now I'm just going to cheat, right? Now I'm going to use my old message to get the average back. I might not do this normally, but I'm going to use this main GUI user event, and I'm going to bundle in, not like that, Neil. Where's the event palettes? So I'm going to generate the event, and obviously my main message is of this type. Remember, it's a message and a payload. So let's bundle something in here. Let's call this guy maybe like stats or something like that. Let's call it mean. For now, it's just the mean. So that like that, that like that, that up to there, that there. So what this is doing is it's going to receive a copy of the vibration data. Don't forget, every time you register, you are making a copy. Like, forget about silver bullets. If you have a 500 megabyte array and you register twice, you are going to use a gig of memory. It's just the way it works. Like, don't try and defeat the system using DVRs and crap like that. You're just going to wish you hadn't. So make a copy and accept the fact that your computer has 30 gigs of RAM, and you don't have to worry about this stuff anymore.
Neil, there's a quick question in the chat.
Yeah.
From Craig.
Okay. Will both the GUI loop and the data processing see the same data? No, they do. They see, because I have two instances of this action here. The clue is in here. So this guy here, my actual user event, is like what you would call like a singleton or like an FGV. There's literally one user event. There's one ref num. It's only one ref num, but I'm registering twice. So I'm calling this piece of code twice. So this wire here and this wire here are going to have different ref numbers on them. I'm creating 2 queues for my data. I'm going to get copies. As soon as my data source generates it, they're both going to receive it. They're both going to receive a copy. There's going to be no alternating there. You literally are saying, right, take this guy and take it to whoever cares. So that's super cool. And then whoever's interested in the data can register for it. And it just gets it, right? And assuming these 2 loops were both sitting doing nothing, they would receive it at literally the same instance in time. I mean, I bet you if you did like time stamping on this somehow, you would probably get down to some fraction of a millisecond on precision on when they handled it. So you're actually getting 2 copies. Is that okay, Craig? Okay, cool. Yeah, there's 2, right? So that's why user events is like a broadcast. And if you want to do different things to the same piece of data, it's such a great mechanism. Is generate it once, handle it as many times as you care about, as long as you've registered multiple times. Okay, so again, I'm just going to cheat here. I'm going to put a false constant so this doesn't stop. And now back in my main VI now, I now need to put back in, I shouldn't have deleted that, so I need to put back in this thing. This has got a terrible name, by the way, user event out. I can probably fix that by creating myself a constant here and giving it a label. This may not work, but let's just call it messages in, just for argument's sake. Now let's see if I add it. So that still says user event out, but when I go there, I now get messages in up front. LabVIEW is a bit of a pain like that sometimes. So here I've got my name and my payload, which I can handle the same way as I showed you in the beginning. What do we call that guy? We called it mean. So do that. Sorry, I have to tidy the wire up. Variance of data. Where was our mean? We can do the same trick we learned earlier with the backpropagation. Tidy, tidy. So what I'm hoping is now all of a sudden that something happens there. I wonder if anyone realizes why this is not going to work. It's not going to work. It's definitely not going to work because I haven't actually dropped the actor onto the block diagram yet. There's nothing handling it yet. So I've got to take a copy of this data processing GUI, drop it down to there. Let's just quickly spend the minute it's going to take to tidy that guy up. Okay, so that's going to look like that. This is going to call something like data processing. And we're going to call this data processing. Sorry, I'm rushing, guys. Yeah, I'll show you guys a lot. Data processing process. Oh, data processing process. That's horrible. I would actually have to stop and just stop at this point and figure out how to call that. But for now, I'm not going to bother. So hopefully that should be it. And sure enough, our mean is running. And I think I'm probably out of time. Okay, as I said, I could carry on. Like literally, I could carry on, but I don't want to hold up the event. That's awesome, Neil. Thanks very much. I don't know what's everyone's feel for carrying on or not. I know Becky, you just joined us. You're happy not to start a little bit later, then we can carry on for a little bit longer. But if you I can start later. This is way more exciting than requirements. Let's be honest. Okay. It seems like we're getting a bit of positive feedback. Yeah. Okay. Cool. Yeah, carry on first for sort of everyone okay for comfort breaks, but I guess so. Yeah, let's carry on for another 10-15 minutes. Okay. Neil, then, and perfect. Perfect. As I say, I stopped preparing for this at about this VR, so this is all just totally ad lib. But let's see where we get to. So the one thing I wanted to cover that John touched on, my technique's a little different to his actually, but similar in principle, is how you get back data. Say I want to ask for something. I'm trying to think of a super contrived example here, but say I wanted to ask this actor specifically for a piece of data and I wanted to get it back. And I didn't want to go to all the faff of making a message and a channel and a user event and all that crap. So let's try and think of a sensible but not super contrived use case here. This is going to be contrived. What if we had, okay, so say sometimes our vibration DAC fell over, okay, just for argument's sake, right? And I wanted to read back the status of the DAC, but I didn't want to constantly broadcast it. I'll tell you what, that's a bad example. I want to get back this iteration count. Okay, so I want to know this number, but I only want to know it every now and then, maybe once an hour. I don't want to constantly broadcast it. I don't want to flood everything. I want it to be like a request type message. So let's try and solve that problem. How would I ask this actor for that thing? Okay, so this is quite nicely solved with this particular framework. And I'm just thinking, excuse me, have you guys noticed that when you sneeze or cough on a Teams meeting, you turn away like without really thinking? You don't mute, which is really the important thing, but you turn away, but then you cough into your microphone. We've only been doing this for like 6 months, but we thought we would have solved that by now. Okay, so I tell you what I'm going to do is, because it requires a bit of framework, I'm going to get another actor to ask the main GUI for the status of some button. Okay, this is not a, okay, I never resize buttons like this. I would never do this in a GUI, I promise you, but I'm just so that you guys can see, I'm making that button nice and big. Right, I've moved past that phase, but let's call this status. Right, and I can't even spell status. LabVIEW. Status. Okay, say something else wants to query for that. So what I'm going to do is, and you know what? Just because I feel too lazy to make a new actor, I'm just going to drop a loop down here. So ignore the fact that I could read this using a local variable down here. Pretend that there is a great chasm between here and here. It's like a laser beam or something, a freaking laser beam. And I can't read that using a local variable. So I want to get that status here. Okay, just for total argument's sake, using some kind of mechanism. All right, hooking into that. So here's this here, and here's the status up here. All right, so I'm going to introduce the concept of a synchronous reply message. That's really where I'm going with this. So I've got this guy. I'm going to make a message. Call me saying get status. So it's like a getter. Okay, it doesn't want to be in data processing. It wants to be under here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is kind of hook into this messaging framework, but just extend it slightly. So one way to do it, and John showed you how to, you need a reply channel somehow, right? You need some way of getting the data back. And his example he showed was, I believe on the fly, you make like a user event, something like that, which is actually neat. I've literally never thought about that. So the way I'm going to show you may actually be rubbish in comparison. So I prefer the notifier. There's just literally it's all I thought about. I mean, maybe I shouldn't even go on because maybe the user event is superior, but let me show you how to use the notifier in an actual application. So what I need is a good old message saying get status. Right, here we go. Get status, and here's the status. And somehow I need to get this back down to here. So let's at least make the get status message. So we've got our user event where we can generate, I can't even find it, generate the user event. And the thing we're going to pass back is this type. Okay, so this is going to be get status, and in this instance, we're not going to have a payload. It's just going to be like a, request of some sort. It's going to be get status. So if I fire this guy off, and I know my output type is going to be this big horrible that thing. Okay, that's what I want out. I want this to come out of this VI. So I want that somehow here. So obviously if I run this thing and in this loop here, I'm going to do it continuously. So there's get status, and because I'm not a status, I'm going to slow this loop down to say once a second. User events are great, but like don't run them at a full loop rate without a loop. Like you're going to, at some point, your computer's going to say, well, I'm just giving up. Because as soon as you register, it makes a buffer, it's going to make space, and you're going to run out of memory. And we all know how easy it is to abort out of LabVIEW's out of memory dialog. So, okay, so if I run this piece of code, and again, I'm sorry, I'm just going to force it there. If I run this, what hopefully is going to happen is this piece of code is going to fire off. And just for my own sanity, I'm going to do that. I'm going to put a breakpoint here because I'm just, again, I'm making this up as I go along. But if I run this, I'm hoping that that breakpoint is going to get hit, which it does, right? So which means this bottom loop asked it for this piece of data. So now one way to get it back is with a notifier. So at this point here, what I want to do is I'm going to create a notifier. That's not the right notifier. I don't know where that came from. Notifier, obtain, sorry. I don't know what create notifier does. And I guess I could use the actual data type. So let's just create ourselves a constant here. I'm being super lazy. So that's the data type. Right, but now I need to somehow, see here's my notifier channel. And I want to wait on the notifier. All right, there's notifier, and there's the notification out status. But how do I get this up to here? So one way to do it is using a sorry, I just totally lost my train of thought there. Something like it must happen, like you just a train drives over some train tracks somewhere, something. I'm actually going to, for various reasons, use a variance constant here. I'll show you why. So that is my return channel effectively, and I can turn this into a control. So I'm going to call this thing here return data. It's not data, it's more like a channel. Sorry, naming things are hard. You should always try and don't just stick with your first name. And the cool thing about having a type def here is I can now open that and I can literally paste that thing in. There's my return channel. So now when I apply it, I get it. So here is basically passing in like a self-addressed stamped envelope, whatever you call it, saying, here, please use this. Please use this as the answer. And I'm better put an error cluster here to kind of synchronize this data. And obviously I can no longer convert straight to a Boolean because LabVIEW won't let me do that. So let's just cheat a bit and use our good old friendly cheating on the variant. So now I've passed that thing up into here, and now I'm going to get that thing. There's my return channel. So now I can very easily use that to, where's send notifier? Send. I don't know what LabVIEW's doing. Right, and it's a variant, which means I can throw anything into it. The reason I chose a variant is, what did I do? I think I've wired that wrong. Sorry, can't see what I'm doing now. Yeah, that needs to go up to there. The data needs to go to there. Get rid of our breakpoints. The reason I chose a variant is because this is now common to all the use cases. So I can't really strictly type it because it needs to be a common type for all the use cases. So hopefully now, when I send that up to here, it's going to handle it, and I should probably have some kind of sensible timeout, but for now I don't. Let's run it and see what happens. Sure enough, Yeah, we get our data. So that's a technique for getting data back, some kind of synchronous return method. Obviously, you've got to be careful because you can lock up your code here. I've got an infinite timeout. So if, for argument's sake, this didn't return data, then this bit of code wouldn't stop and we'd get in trouble. So that is a technique for returning data using a message protocol. This kind of structure I use all the time. I package it up into classes and I hide it around a bit, but it's kind of like my nirvana. I don't know, I need to watch your talk, John, but this is my my nirvana. And on that, I will bid you adieu.
Nice one, Neil. That was awesome. Really appreciate that. I think it's great to see just coding in a session. It's yeah, nice. Anyone got any questions?
It's one from Petru here. Actor and process. Yeah, like to me, they're the same thing. In my brain, I standardized on actor, yet whenever I name the VI, I call it a process. It's awful, but I've done it in so many places now that for consistency, I'm just going to keep it. But to me, it's they're natural things. If anyone's curious and you speak a bit of C#, check out Akka. So Akka.net, I actually think Akka is from Erlang or Scala or something like that.
I just spelled
Akka is
that.
awesome, and it makes it so easy to create actors in C#. You know, all this crap we have to do with making an event structure and handling all that, it just sort of happens magically for you. And I kind of wish LabVIEW had the ability to do that, to inherit structure from a base class, where you can't really do that. You can't get an event structure from a parent class. If we could, there'd be so much less like boilerplate code that we'd have to write. It's on the wish list.
So just to pick up on what you said about John explained that slightly differently in terms of the notifier. How would that have been different with John's approach? So
John's approach, I believe, is pretty similar, but instead of having a obtain notifier here, on the fly, he created the user event and then had an event structure handling it at this point. Is that right, John?
There's sort of two ways of doing it. Yeah, if you want to go down, so essentially you can use the event structure synchronously, a bit like a notifier. But if you're willing to do a bit more legwork and you want an asynchronous reply, then you create your user event, and then instead of handling it sort of at the same time as requesting it, you essentially add an extra message handler in, an extra case event handler in. Okay. So yeah, certainly the notifier is like a good solid return. You've got like timeouts, you can wait on multiple notifications. It's like a sort of nice straightforward way of doing it, but with the risk of locking. So yeah. Sure.
I think, is that like, are you talking about like things like futures? I think I've heard them call it as futures, where you're asking for like a promise or something and someone's promising to give you data back at some point.
Yeah, it gets a bit promising, except LabVIEW doesn't have the nice concept of like a nice sort of logical chaining. You have to sort of try and create that. So you have to, somewhere in your main loop that sent the request, sort of maintain some state so you know that you're waiting on a request. And when it comes back, you're like, oh, here's that data I requested. Now I can do the rest of what I wanted to do. So yeah, it's a similar concept, but as you said, not as elegant when written in LabVIEW. So
sure. Okay, you could maybe solve that with like a callback of some sort, like here, call this VI, sort of like a .NET callback. It's like when you get this, run this piece of code for me.
Yeah, that's a really nice thing when you then use something like a class to essentially abstract out that callback. You can get like you can do those sort of architectures, but yeah, 99% of the time a notifier is great for just getting that return data back. And as you said, you can either create a sort of a constant, like a channel that is long running, or you can just create a one-off channel, and send it with your request message. That's
yeah. And one thing I've totally forgotten to show here is I would destroy the notifier at this point. It would be create, use, destroy, and do that as many times as you need to.
Cool. AJ was just asking whether you'd be able to share that code, Neil.
Yeah, I can. I mean, it's awful. It's super messy, and I'd have to scrub like my name from all traces. But absolutely, I can zip it up and I can put it on the. Does the team chat stay open after the team? I don't know how it works in Teams. Does the chat window stay open? I tell you what. While Becky's chatting, I'll quickly zip it up and I'll check it on the.
Okay.
Okay.
Awesome. Any other questions, guys? No, I don't think there is. Thanks very much again, Neil. Nice one.
Okay. Cool.
Becky, if you don't mind, can we take a quick break, like 10 minutes? And if